Do you have something special to bring to the world? Are you sitting on some idea or product or vision that has been filling up your notebooks or your spare thinking time while you're doing your day job or going through the motions of life? At this point, I have seen the inner workings of thousands of crowdfunding campaigns, people who are trying to bring their ideas to the world and going directly to the communities that want to support it. So, this conversation today is with my friend Charly Vollmer, who stopped by. He is in the last day of his Kickstarter campaign, and he is bringing these really cool wood and magnet robot toys to the world. And in this conversation, we talk about what that process is like going from idea to reality. We talk about how our culture is set up to reward um, things that are less than the best quality, and at the worst times, things that are actually toxic for us. So this is a great conversation to listen to like a podcast. It's like listening to friends over coffee. But I think this is a really cool one. I think we go pretty deep. We talk a lot about our culture and the way that we prioritize things. And I think for any of you out there that are seeking to bring something to the world or just want to get a behind the scenes look of someone doing that in real time, then check out this episode. It's a little bit longer. It's more like a podcast, but I hope you enjoy this conversation with Charly of Wookins. If you want to support his Kickstarter, you can go to Kickstarter and search for Wookins. I'll put a link in the description. This is the last day, so you better hurry if you're hearing this now. But regardless, this is a great conversation. I think you'll get a lot out of it. And yeah, enjoy.
It's hard to kind of pinpoint what is motivation, right? Like, when does an idea actually kind of like come to life, right? Like, when does the ball actually start rolling? Like, I actually reached out. I looked at the archives of my emails. I had been in discussions, in 2015 with Chinese manufacturers to make this toy. And to be honest, those manufacturers, like people in China, are hungry for work and they wanted to build it. Like, they were super excited and they wanted to do it, right? But that was 7 years ago, and still to this day, we don't have the first production, manufactured yet. And, like, when did this actually start? Like, there was a lot of ups, a lot of downs. There was a lot of struggle, right? And,
Yeah, I was thinking earlier that in a way, I think this guy symbolizes you.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a physical manifestation of your values and beliefs in a squarish robot that's probably full of opinions, but thankfully he can't talk. The ones with the string that you pull.
Yeah.
Those look like, oh shit! You need stronger magnets, dude.
Yeah, this is the prototype. This one needs some stronger magnets. But they're wood blocks. They're made for...
Yeah, they're made for...
to disassemble, and it's totally fine. And these are hardwoods, and, maple is one of the hardest woods out there. I can geek out on wood types. This can withstand kids chucking it at edges of marble.
Yeah.
And it'll hold up just fine.
Yeah.
Like, this is literally made to last 100 years. Like, if I build a house, I want it to last at least 100 years. If I build a toy, I want it to last at least 100 years. Like, why shouldn't it outlast me?
Yeah, so, okay, with that, analogy, because I just see, like, the quality craftsmanship, the hardwoods, the durability. What made you want to tackle kids' toys as a focus back in 2015, or whenever this started?
Yeah, it kind of, like, follows in line with your kind of, some of your material and content, too, right? Like, we don't have this. We don't have this in the world. It's not prevalent. Like, if I go into my backyard, I see plastic toys laying on the ground, chewed up by my dog. If I go to my friends' houses and I go to their kids' rooms, they're just filled with plastic toys, and it was like only last year, I'm like 35 years old, did I realize that plastics enter everyone's bodies, right? Like, I don't want to, like, spit on, or, like, totally just have, like, a meltdown on plastics, because I think plastics are miraculous, right? And they enable miraculous things. But, like, we needed an alternative, and no one was building this. Nobody was valuing this. I think people value it, but it just wasn't out there, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you bring it into the world? And, that was something that definitely was difficult for me. It still is difficult for me, and it has been difficult for me, but I think it's worthwhile, and it's awesome. Like, there's no regrets, for sure, going down this path.
Yeah, so my past life was helping people with crowdfunding campaigns. So I've seen hundreds of campaigns at this point. Like, that's an understatement. And everyone comes to the table with some big vision, and then it's a slow and painful process of breaking down that big vision into those like first steps that you can actually take. And I think a lot of people's ideas stall on the launch pad because we're too busy assembling this beautiful rocket ship and we don't have any fuel for it.
Yeah. Totally.
So what has your experience been with taking, those little steps towards the bigger vision?
Yeah, so I think everyone has this in their life, right? So as an entrepreneur, this isn't my first project that I've brought to life or tried to bring to life. And I've definitely gotten caught in that same thing where I overanalyze everything, and I'm thinking about this business. We want to like throw out 42 different toys, different series, different models, have little cars or animal figures, and like this and that. Like we have this grand vision, but the truth is you got to bring it down. And yeah, what are these like bite-sized bits, and like what is the actual next step? And everyone has that, right? Like you've seen those studies where everyone overestimates what they can get done in a year, but more importantly, we all underestimate what we can get done in 10 years, right? And we all have to feed ourselves, and I think we get lost in this game of feeding ourselves and like taking care of like the immediacy and satisfying the immediacy. I mean, it's just like cell phones. Like we want to satisfy the micro. You talk about micro dosing. Well, that's kind of like what checking your feed is, right? It's like micro dosing. You're really not looking. Your action is not a 10-year action. You're not planting a seed that's going to have fruition in 10 years, right? And this is really like, like you've built companies, so you know what it's like. Your company's still alive, right? And like I want this to be around in 60 years, right? So then what is that long term, what are the methodical steps to take now? And like thinking, I think that, yeah, I benefit from thinking long term, right? I'm fortunate that I've kind of learned how to feed myself in the near term, right? And I'm the luckiest man alive, so I'll be the first to say that. But like when you start looking further and further out, you can make more, like I hate to say it, like Jeff Bezos, and, from a business perspective, like you look long term, you care about the long term value, your decisions are different in the short term, right?
Yeah, for you with this particular project, how much of it has been planning and intention versus serendipity? What do you feel like you're in control of here, and what are the things that you're just letting flow?
Yeah. So full disclosure, I honestly, I mean, I'm a formally trained mathematician, right? So like probabilistically speaking, everything was luck. Everything. Every single bit. Everything was serendipitous. But Thomas Jefferson, well, he was a slave trading bastard, but one of my favorite quotes was, the harder I work, the luckier I seem to be. Right? So like there is, I think, intention and like bringing, things to life. Like this is really hard. Like as a software developer, right? It's so easy for me to write code and instantly copy it. But bringing this to life like requires other people. It really requires other people. And that's really difficult. Like, I used to be a mountain guide, and the hardest thing was group dynamics. Not surviving on a glacier, right? It wasn't like the technical aspect of like literally rock fall coming down on your head. The hardest aspect of 30 days out, like crossing, the Mount St. Elias range was group dynamics. And that's the same thing here. Like this, I cannot bring this to life by myself. And dealing with people is really hard. Like for me, I don't want to like project on everyone else because other people are better at it, but like that is really hard. So everything has been falling together, and how people are going to react. Like I can't plan for that. Like we were kind of talking about this before, right? Like, I asked you, how do I get people to do what I want them to do, but like faster and like how I want them, not how they're going to do it. Right. And your response was really poignant. It was like, well, you can't expect a sheep, to behave like a cow, right? Like, and yeah, why would I get mad at my dog for behaving like a dog, right? Like, she's protecting us. I shouldn't get mad that she's barking on our behalf, right? Like, how do you honestly, and it's the same with humans, right? Like, and to be honest, I need to learn I have to get better at that. I'm learning, I'm still learning, and hopefully I will continue to get better at, like embracing that they do it differently than me, right? The embracing that they have a different wavelength that they're operating on, embracing that they have different values and motivations. I don't know what is motivation, right? So how do I reconcile other people's, day to day, plus their visions, plus their like aspirations as humans, plus their values, into manifesting this idea into the world, right? So you have to get other people on board. You have to play to their, desires and strengths as well. It's complicated, right? It's definitely complexed.
Yeah. And motivation is a weird thing because just as a person, my own motivation is difficult to get my hands around. And then when you start talking about you get your motivation and now it relies on other people and they're not doing what you need them to do. And I think that we have almost a crisis of motivation right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of previous modes of operating, more of like that factory mentality that has really left this culture.
Sure.
And so I just remember this from, years of probably the interns were where I saw it the most. Like we had a lot of interns and a lot of them came from CSU. And some of them, they were just self-motivated. They were always looking for something to do. They were, and I don't know what their background was necessarily that had that looking, like, where can I apply myself? How can I be valuable? Versus what I saw a lot more in the college interns that we had was the, like, I'm not going to do anything unless you tell me explicitly what to do.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not even going to do that unless you do half of it for me to show me how it's done.
Right.
And then if you turn your attention away for a few minutes, I'm going to go back to, looking at sports scores or
right.
There's this sort of, I don't know. And it might just be in the U.S. and it might just be a product of years and years of not having to work very hard to have basic needs met. But I also am, just aware that as a competitive landscape, the United States has really gone from being a place of factory workers and industry, which isn't any better or worse, to a land of consumers and what's in it for me. And
Totally.
and I'm even struggling with this personally. Like I was talking to Kayla last night. I'm just in a place where I feel very strongly rooted in my convictions that I don't want to make money if it's hurting people, or I don't want to do anything less than something really worthwhile. And that then becomes an excuse to dodge responsibility because most of the jobs and things out there are not super fulfilling or...
And actually, I would love to come back on that issue of like what is economic and what is trade in like the modern times. And I do want to like double click on that. But to like reiterate what you were first saying, right? Like if you read Tony Robbins or, Steven Pinker or like, they will all tell you if you really want to kind of like, I don't want to use the word manipulate, but if you want to get people to do things, right? Like you need to make it so that the idea seems like it's theirs, right? And then that gives them the motivation to actually go through with it. So I like to look at it actually more like this, like where does the inspiration come from? And the truth is, right? And so, and that's kind of like the psychology behind that is like have the inspiration, try to make it come from within. But instead, the way I look at it is like, I'm not the inspiring one. So if people come and want to be a part of Wookins, it's not because of me, right? It shouldn't be like, oh, he's cool, he drives a flashy car, like I want to be like him. No, it's the toy. It's that this satisfying clank. They're clanking wood blocks, man. They're clanking wood blocks. It's awesome. It's so fundamental. It's wood. You touch it. It's nice. There's a balance between nature. I'm a technologist, but there's still a balance in life between nature and the natural world and living inside my head, right? So when I'm like doing mathematics, I'm living inside of my head and I'm not in the physical world at all, right? Math, does it exist outside of the physical world? We can debate that. But I think that there's a balance, right? And these toys are kind of an attempt to get back at that natural world. This is as fundamental of a toy and interaction because this is more than just a toy, right? Like this inspires creativity because, children and adults, like why don't adults role play? right? Kids are so good at it. You give them a Wookin and they just start coming up with a story. They create a plot. They create conflict. They start having like, you'll see people like they're arguing with each other about what? Who knows? They're creating it, right? This is role playing. And then if they have two kids together, they'll start bursting. Bursting is like when you cut someone off because you're in this like jumble. And this is like what, cognitive psychologists call it, is bursting. They get into this like frenzy of creativity, right? And this is good for us. This is inspiration. This is innovation. This is how we reach the next, right? Is actually cutting people off from talking, right? But kids do this, but we don't do it as adults because it's socially unacceptable, right? So, like if I want to have people rally around Wookins or support it or be a part of it, first off, I just put it into people's hands and let the toys do themselves. And they really do. I am doing the whole digital marketing, the digital presence thing, because that's how, and we'll get back to like what is modern, economics perhaps. But, let the toys do themselves because they are inspirational. They do create creativity, or they create a space for creativity. You can get into the zone and just kind of like block out all of this other stuff. You don't have to worry about being hungry or whatever because you're just playing. And play is like fundamental to human beings, right? But playing with what? You play with sticks, you play with dirt, you play with water, like watch a kid in the water and the waves, like, and the Wookins gets back to that. So, like I don't need to actually motivate people, or I don't think I'm purporting, and I could be projecting here, but like really this is my, my driving force is that take care of the pounds and the pennies will take care of themselves, kind of a thing. Like, I got to take care of, like, in reality, bringing these to life has a lot of like physical, pragmatic, tangential or like tangible kind of like decisions that need to be made. But
you said something interesting, is that people will come and they'll rally behind the idea itself. But in hearing you talk, I think that a lot comes from a leader who is everything that you just said, that's the type of thing that takes just another random wood robot, which I'm sure there's other wood robots out there in the world, but puts a story behind it and puts this intention. And then for someone who's making the toys or selling the toys or helping along the way, I don't think people do things very well unless there's a deeper why. And if you told me, like, we're making this robot because it's cheap to produce, we can make 1 million units, blah, 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 you're going to pique the interest of a certain type of person, and actually a lot of the people that I've come across that are investing in businesses, like, they are, and I mean, this is like almost a true story. I remember pitching Community Funded when it was in its early stages, and we laid out this beautiful presentation about transforming communities and empowering people. And then the next pitch that went after us was like a medical device that you like implant under the skin that like does this thing, and most people don't need it, but it's like, this is the unit, cost, and this is the scale that we're going to hit. And it was actually like, it was not really like a positive thing at all. It was just like a widget that did a thing that had a cost. And the investors were diving all over that, like, oh, you can implant this in someone's eyeball and their eyeball will fall out, but how much can we sell it for? And so, but I think the type of person that falls in love with a company and wants to work there, or is willing to go above and beyond and not be that, checking sports scores in the middle of the day, but actually driving the company's mission forward, that only happens when there is that deeper why and a leader or leadership team or whoever that's able to communicate that internally first and then out to the world. And that's
and that could be the case, right? And we're not quite at that point where like, but I definitely see that. Like, I've had to communicate what is the vision, what is like the essence behind this, and like I said, putting it into people's hands, they can kind of get what the object itself, what is the essence behind it, right? Like that magnets, like you start playing with magnets, and I don't need to tell you about magnets for you to like be curious about them, right? But yeah, you're right. And I think that there is a group dynamics. There is a role for leadership. And we could get into that, and start talking about like Trump and his family and what it means to lead human beings, right? And and I definitely, believe in leadership and leadership qualities, and you know, I'm kind of like a part of my household, right? I have a wife and kids, and I have a dog, and yeah, I consider myself the alpha, and like, of course, like this is, I don't know if you want to get into like natural pecking orders here. Like, I got chickens too, and I can tell you there is a pecking order in my chickens, right? Like, does that mean anything? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we wear pants and we make fancy noises, but we have in us hundreds of thousands of years of animal survival and group dynamics. Like the group dynamics that we're wrestling with in office situations wearing slacks and shoes are the same people dynamics that were out on plains hunter-gathering chasing buffalo, and
Right.
frickin' Billy won't throw the spear right, so I gotta go club him and make him fall in line.
Right.
His name wasn't Billy, it was Arg, but
Yeah, so this is a great one. So proud dad moment here. Yesterday my son came home with a bracelet. He was nominated by his peers he got the kindness award. So his peers said that he is one of the kindest, friends at school. And to me, that's even better than his bringing home an A+ on a test, right? Because this is like, how do we interact with humans? Well, I think it starts with kindness. And I kind of mentioned it to you the other day, right? My buddy who runs a coffee shop, he owns a coffee shop here in town. I asked him, I was like, man, you have like everyone, it seems like they're all in the same boat and they're all rowing at the same time and they're all rowing in the same direction, and I know that coffee margins aren't huge. Like, how do you do it, right? Like, and he takes a second, he gets a little pensive, and he's like, well, man, you just got to be nice to people. Right? And totally, like, that is probably the essence of a leader, right? Is like showing vulnerability and like empathizing with people, getting in their shoes. If someone does something wrong or does something quote unquote bad, right? If you're kind to them, like, that's going to be the best solution. This is an opinion and I could be wrong, but like, right? Like, that's going to be the best way forward. And as like small communities, we used to be better at that, like taking the ostracized and reincorporating them instead of throwing them into a jail, instead of throwing them, like, pushing them, marginalizing them more, making them more extreme. No, we used to take them and be like, hey man, you made a mistake. That's wrong. I'm going to slap your wrist, right? It's kind of like you beat up your friend for cheating on his girlfriend, like, we like Anna, you shouldn't have done that, but, like, you're going to miss your flight today because if you're not going to learn that lesson, we're going to teach it to you, right? But this idea of kind of like, sorry.
That sounds like a story.
But like that idea of like, this is what a community is. We support one another, and this is what a group is. This is what a company is. To me, a company is not like some evil corporation. A company is a group of people. A group of people. And what are they doing? Right? What are they doing? Are they building something? Of course they're building something. They're a part of this world, like whether they're getting shampoo to your, to your bathroom so you can read it while you're sitting on your stool, right? Or clean your hair, right? Or they're building a Wookin, they're building toys, right? Or they're, chopping wheat in the field and delivering it to you so that you can eat and make bread without having to know how to propagate plants. We're just groups of people, and that's why, it gets back. The fundamental, be kind.
Well, let me throw this one at you, because this is something that I've been like minute to minute grappling with. Is I have a growing irritation in the fact that our entire economic system seems to be set up to reward and propagate the most profitable,
for sure,
versus the quality.
For sure.
And as people, I think for most or a lot of the major industries, and that includes entertainment, that includes transportation and food and clothing, individuals are looked at as a target, as a consumer, and not as a member of a community. And a lot of businesses, even the ones that start off really well-meaning, because the way the economy is slanted to reward scaling and reward, the most units at the cheapest cost, and if you can wiggle through a loophole and get something out there that's toxic, but we're going to make a buck, like, by God, we're going to do it, because that is driving the bottom line. We can hire more people. There's more jobs. The investors are happy. We're, scaling and growing. And I've just really witnessed, even with this YouTube experiment, that the paths to be rewarded for less than virtuous activity are everywhere, present all the time. And like you said, you could have taken this to China and produced this in mass and done, more units, more this, that, and the other. But you are going to fight an uphill battle trying to keep it, high quality, handmade, made in the U.S. So
we won't even get into the manufacturing nightmares of manufacturing in the U.S., if you will. But totally, and that's lamentable. Like I could be old school. I am kind of like traditional in my thinking, right? Like that, dude. We're all weak. We're human beings, and like we need a little help. And it's lamentable that we we use our cognitive biases against each other, right? Like that stickiness, like your Light Phone founder video, which was awesome, by the way. They're taking advantage. How do you make an app stickier? Which means, how do we get consumers to put more attention here? Like, there's no way that people think, that the world is getting better by spending 6 hours on your phone. I'm really not trying to turn this into like a hate speech, but like, it's too bad that we take advantage of these cognitive weaknesses that we all have, right? To get us to do things for monetary value. And it is all for monetary value, right? And that's lamentable, and that's too bad. And I wish it were otherwise. And we can actually do something different. We just have to kind of wake up. And it's too bad that we're stuck in that daily grind that it's hard to wake up from, right? Like, because we are just trying to feed ourselves to some extent.
I think I was telling you the story yesterday when we were talking, but I remember back to, again, like early days of community funded, when we were just building the very first version of the platform, hadn't even launched it yet, and we had these people coming around us that were former Silicon Valley. They had invented microchips and had made millions, and like they had seen that whole .com world, and they were coming here to Fort Collins and giving us advice. And because there wasn't much happening in those days, like tech in this town. I mean, there was like some of the big companies. There was the HPs and stuff.
Intels,
yeah, totally. But
Avago, Broadcom.
Yeah, but like there wasn't a lot of like startup, so we were kind of
scrappy.
And we had people coming around us. I remember they were like, "You can't do this here. You have to go to California." And we were like, "Watch us! Like we're gonna do this in this little cow town. Yeah, we got no developers here, no resources, but like this is the heart and soul that we're trying to bring to the world. If we go to Silicon Valley, now we're embodying those values. The whole idea behind the original platform was to bring this local living economy into a digital space."
Sure.
And this guy said, I remember, like I can hear the words ringing in my ears. He said with such disdain, like, you got to decide what you want to be. Do you want to be a lifestyle company where you're like skateboarding to work and taking your kid in and everyone's just like having a party every day? Or do you want to like make it big and like hockey stick growth and blah, blah. And like, that taint of a lifestyle company was like over our heads. Like when we talk to investors, they're like, "Are you just trying to build like a lifestyle company, or are you really gonna like go for it?" And we're like, "Yeah, we're going for it, sir. Like, give us your money." And all along the way, I was like, "Can we have that conversation again? Like, where is the real value?" And
totally. And actually, HP, when they came out here in the 70s, they purposely came out here because they knew that the quality of life was going to be better for their engineers, right? So they wanted to like build the personal computer, but they knew that out there it was growing so fast that their engineers, their people, right? Like that's them, is the people, would have a higher quality of life. Their dollars would go farther here in Colorado. They would be happier. And to this day, right? Like that, everything came out of that, like the beer industry, like casual Colorado dress. Like everyone knows us because of that quality of life, right?
And
like,
so everyone's coming here and they're bringing the
outside
values.
The outside world. Yeah, but then that's what I love about Colorado. Like this is a sidetrack, but like it is actually East meets West. Like there are still cowboys, right? They are like diehard conservative Republicans who are like, "Don't tread on me," kind of like cowboy mentality, which I love. And then there's also that other like, very progressive kind of woke culture of like, that other side, right? And it really clashes, right? And but still we get things pushed through. Like we legalize marijuana here, we legalize gay marriage here, we so even though there is this clash, like we actually do change and adapt and move forward, which is great. And you get both sides of the story, or more than one.
Yeah,
love it here.
This episode brought to you by the Colorado Tourism Board.
Yeah, hashtag visit Fort Collins. No, go to Loveland, go to Colorado Springs. No.
Yeah, I recognize that I have sort of the embittered feelings of someone who like went to war and then came back and no one understood the war type thing. That might be a little extreme, but I personally, and this is why I'm really interested to talk to you, because I feel like, you're making these toys not because it's easy, but because there's something here that you talked about earlier that is important and that is interesting. And when a kid gets a Wookin, like, good has been put into the world, and you did that, and that is fulfilling. And my lament is that I personally have stuck so tightly to these values that we should be good to each other. We should be looking to bring things to the world that don't just profit us or our company, but actually are making ripples and enabling more people to do more good things and have good experiences. And the farther I've gotten down that path, the more I have to question it, because the world does not reward that kind of activity. Like, you really have to fight for it. You have to find a following or an audience that resonates, and even then you're fighting an uphill battle against the people that'll see the parts of what you're doing that are cool and then just copy it at scale. Or, like, there's a million ways
so I would love to push back on that a little bit.
Sure, do it.
If you let me. Like, maybe I'm just, like, too young and naive, and I haven't been to that war yet, to, like, get jaded. But I'm very optimistic. And I want to say, like, I think that slower growth, is like the real, true, meaningful growth, right? That slow catch on, that you don't need to spread like fire and scale up like crazy, because when you do it like slowly, it's actually going to be long lasting and meaningful, and you're really digging deeper and planting deeper seeds, right? I could go on and on about that, but
I agree with you. But the world, and I know that I'm like going to hyperbole here, and I'm just generalizing like the world, but for most of the business scene, slow growth is not interesting. It's hard, it's laborious, and if in 5 years, you've only grown by 1 or 2%, you're going to start asking questions of like, maybe I should just go to that Chinese supplier. And if in that time you're going slow and someone says, oh, you know what, wood toys are really cool, we're going to produce the same thing, we'll change the head a little bit, but we're going to go out there, we're going to call it Wookins, and now all of a sudden you're competing against someone who doesn't have the values, who doesn't have, and they are going to be fed. They're going to drive the fancier car. They're going to have, like the models of the economy are geared to reward a certain type of behavior.
For sure.
And it's not slow growth and focused on quality and sustainability.
So you actually here, like, I'm not a fanboy here. I don't know Elon Musk, but one thing is, like, Tesla used to give away their patents. They let people take their technology, right? And they kind of say this out loud, that they really care about the whole entire industry of EV cars, taking off. So yeah, what does it mean if GM and Ford get into the EV market? Isn't that bad for Tesla? Right? Is that bad for Tesla? Because they're taking market share. They're taking garages away from Tesla, right? But the truth is, if the mission is to increase, EV cars, if that's your mission, whether you agree with that or not, or you can we can debate about that. But then influencing other people. So if people copy us, right? First off, someone copying you is supposed to be the biggest form of flattery, right? It's the biggest form of validation. But that means that there's more wooden toys in the world. Yeah. That means there's one less plastic toy. I love the little like bumper sticker of like one less car, right? Someone has on their bike, right? Like, yeah, just because he's biking too isn't bad for me biking, right? That means there's more bikers, right? Like there's less exhaust that I need to breathe, so I'm happy about that. And if there's more like wooden magnetic toys out there, that means other people are going to be more creative. They're going to create other cooler things that I'm going to be stoked about. So I guess there's two ways to view that. Yeah. I totally get you, and like, and I don't, yeah.
It's and I've had this experience because you know, I keep referencing back to my last war with community funded, and we started when, you know, Indiegogo was just launching. Kickstarter had only been out for like a year or two, right. And GoFundMe was like started at the same time that we did, and then we got into these other industries, and by the end it's like, well, we never took off like GoFundMe. We never were like the household name that everyone's going to.
Sure.
But, you know, in these areas that we actually played, like, we changed an entire industry. Now everyone's using this language of like generosity and community and impact, whereas before, you know, in a lot of these markets it was about like, you know, annual givers and lapsed donors, and like it was just this cold impersonal. So like we had an effect on an entire industry. We just weren't the ones who ultimately were like rewarded by the monetary system for that impact.
So then I would say just embrace that, right? Embrace, like, because that's actually what you were going after. I could be projecting here, but I bet that change was what you cared about, right? That was your mission. And now you can look back and say, like, we actually made that difference, right? I get it that you weren't like retiring with $60 million in your pocket perhaps, and you weren't, you know, monetarily valued in that sense. You know, in like the Kickstarter campaign, it was awesome. I did a lot of soul searching, as you kind of knew was going to happen, right? And my partner, you know, she told me, so when one of my friends unsubscribed from our email list, you know, it was kind of like a hard hit, and I was all bummed out. And like that had never happened to me, right? Like as a mathematician, no one had ever unsubscribed. One of my friends is like, no more, right? So it was like hard for me. And my partner, my wife, she was like, you know what? Like, just look at the people who have supported you. You have backers, right? You have buy-in. Embrace that. Focus on that. Fixate all of your energy and attention on that. Don't worry about like these other negatives that have happened. Like, yeah, you felt like crap because he unsubscribed from you, you know, like Alan. But but like embrace like the goodness and embrace what was actually great about that. And, you know, maybe that's my optimism, and like, you know, I like to exercise, so it helps me to be like, I get that dopamine.
No, it's true. I mean, we have this tendency to focus on, I mean, I see this quite often, like I'll have 100 really positive comments on something, and then that one person who kind of says something that like, and it kind of rings true, and it's just like, that's the one that you'll walk around with.
Yeah, totally.
And, yeah, I mean, I feel like part of my my interest has been and continues to be helping however I can, especially creatives, like creative people, putting cool things into the world and saying like, we can do this better, let's do this better. I have also just seen so many stories unfold, and I know how difficult it is. And it's like I mean, what you're talking about, the optimism there, like seeing the good, and if this, you know, takes off in a little way, and then some other company comes in and fills that gap because they can do it, you know, bigger, faster, quicker, and now there's more of your vision in the world. It just doesn't have your brand name on it.
Yeah.
Like it takes a certain,
for sure, like,
you know, real deep existential, like, yeah, I did that. Like the world is different. It wasn't through the means that I thought it was going to happen, but there it is.
Yeah, totally. I've never experienced that to really, you know, be able to share that with you. It sounds profound, right? Like I'm sure that would be a difficult thing to chew on and digest and like have ruminate in the back of your head, right? And I would say, you know, listen to Bob Marley, like travel wide, man, travel wide. Like if you're out surfing, you're not gonna like be hanging on to those lows. You're gonna be riding the wave, you know, and hopefully, you know, go on to the next thing. Like, yeah, we just love. I've been loving the ride, and I just want to embrace the moment, you know, and like have fun in it. You know, kind of like push those negatives that we do experience, if you want to call them negatives. Like overall, it's been so positive, you know, overall it's been, just amazing to go through it. I'm definitely out of my comfort zone, right? And not to mention like operating a business, like trying to get something manufactured, much less manufactured in the US. Like I could talk about all the nightmares and like headaches that we face, right? And the fires that you have to put out like as an operator of a business. But at the same time, still get to like hang out, have a conversation with a good, interesting human being, right? This is the reality privilege that Mark Andreessen talks about.
Yeah, totally. And to be clear, like I am projecting a lot of my own current, like my own struggles with things like YouTube, and that is not to say that the stage that you're in right now is it's the fun part. It really is. Like
Sure.
when you're at the point of dreaming for so long and you start taking those first small steps and you get to see that serendipity unfold, and there's a really cool life cycle of an idea, especially one that gets made and becomes real. And those early stages, I think, are some of the most just heady, optimistic. Like there's nothing in the world yet, so everything is new and valuable.
Yeah, if I get back to the YouTube versus this project versus Wookins, right? Like the YouTube is similar in that you're reaching out to a community, right? You're grabbing onto a community. The community, you're a part of this community, and you're providing something to this community. But there's this layer in between, which is the algorithm. And as a computer scientist, this algorithm is optimized against the better parts of what community is to you, right? So like you're saying, you're actually swimming up current because you don't get that direct, unfiltered, kind of unfettered relationship with that community, because the algorithm is in between manipulating it. It's manipulating, just like you're saying. Like if you say ads on, then it shows it to your community, or it doesn't. If you turn ads off, it doesn't show it to your community, right? So you actually don't get that. And so far, we don't have that intermediary. We don't have that kind of like hypervisor lens in between us. We are just operating with the community. And I think that's slower. It's harder, right, to make those connections and to grow our network, because it is just the network. I'm just talking with people. I'm sending them emails. I'm sending texts to my good friends, right? So I get that unfiltered thing. Whereas, if we want to grow faster and we want to leverage the algorithms, right? If we want to listen to Tai Lopez and leverage, digital marketing and digital media, you have to use the algorithms. And like you're saying, the algorithms you can only leverage if you play into this system that rewards the negatives, that this system that rewards attention, this system that rewards stickiness of an app, right? Instead of rewarding value brought to the world. It doesn't reward, the shareholder value or stakeholder, excuse me, right? Like this idea of stakeholders, like, are we actually worse off if we spend 6 hours a day on our phones, right? Like as a community, as a society, like does that breed contentment, or does it breed discontent, right? Are wars, worse or better because of this? So I think that slower organic growth in the community, is something that I will try to embrace, and I think we're at a crossroads where we're like finally realizing what a smartphone does to us, or what the internet, like this connectivity of the internet can do to the economy 2.0, right? In the Shopify world. And yeah, I would actually love to talk on some of those topics too, like what is trade, right? Because like trade is like I'm giving you something and you're giving me something. That's what a trade is. Well, what do I need? Right? What do you need? What do we need? What do we need? Right?
I have an answer to that.
Yeah. Well, first you need to fulfill the basics. Food, shelter, and once those are fulfilled, then you start getting into these like, the American needs. Like I need purpose in my job, right? Like you ask a hunter-gatherer, right? Their purpose of life is food. They literally respond, food is the purpose. Yeah. Right? So since we don't have that as our purpose, we have to like search for other purpose, right? And then you get into like the Franken, like, what is the purpose of man kind of a thing, right? But that's trade. So if you're giving content to someone, because people want content, people want interaction, people want knowledge, and they want to be able to learn physics on YouTube, right? So there's a market for that. I think it's really interesting to think, well, what are you exchanging in return? And if we're not aware of what you're exchanging in return, which most of the time you're not aware, because the system tries to obfuscate that from you, right? The system,
well, it forces it into the exchange is just attention for money.
That's what I'm saying. They obfuscate what's really being sold.
Well, they don't obfuscate. They push it towards that being the value. When I look at my YouTube dashboard, it's all optimized to get more eyeballs at any cost. Yeah. And, all the guides that you'll read, it's just like, because it's driving the algorithm, and if you're being fed by the algorithm and that's your business, then it's not really about the content. It's about the entertainment and the entrainment. And then you have, higher frequency, lower quality, more extremes. And that is a microcosm for society at large right now. Like the war for our attention.
Yes.
And
who's going to change that?
Yeah.
Right? So there's a cognitive bias that says like you can't see something that you rely on, right? So Jeff Bezos, when he was, running the, Amazon, if we talk about a retirement crisis in the U.S., okay, well, who knows better how much their employees are saving than the CEO? If you run a company, you know how much they're saving, right? And how well they're going to be when they reach retirement. But Jeff Bezos isn't incentivized to help out their savings, right? He really is, if we actually like dig into it. But on a monetary, scale, and like the fiduciary, to his shareholders, right? And just like, why doesn't Google do something about it? Why doesn't Apple do something about our attention? If they know it's not good to just take our attention for no means necessary, right? Then why don't they do something? Because they're incentivized to not, right? And that's why I say, like, we're obfuscated. We don't realize when we buy an iPhone that we're the product. We're the product being sold. We're being sold to Procter & Gamble, the Johnson family, right? The Johnson family is, like, set sales for the rest of their, like, grandchildren's life, right? Because we're being sold, right? And that's what I'm saying. Like, we don't even realize it. And Google isn't incentivized to help us out. Right, Microsoft is a different story. Like, I actually like a lot of these companies. I think they do a lot of good, but it's something we should talk about as a community, as a society.
I like that analogy. I mean, almost flipping it. Like, we don't see what we need, and we also don't see the ways that we interact. They become like a fish in water. And especially if you're growing up in the digital age, and when, I see so many kids just get handed a smartphone when they're 5 or 6 years old, and like, they're in water that they don't even know that there's air.
Yeah.
And
totally.
we just begin to believe like, oh, this is what I value, and my social media presence is more important than actually having friends that will, tolerate me and sit down with me and have, food with me.
Yeah.
And in a way, and this is my like underlying philosophy, like in a way it's all natural, it's all beauty, it's all just the unfolding that happens when you give a bunch of primates technology that they're designing themselves to hack their own mental pathways to engage with these things more and more and more. But there's some part of me that's just like itchy and knows that it doesn't take much to get someone, even 2 degrees out of the matrix, and now they're asking bigger questions, and they're seeing that the water that we're in is being poured in by interests that don't have our own needs at heart. And you were talking at the beginning about toxic plastics, and there's a toxicity of the excess, and that's true of the materials that we're around, that's true of the media that we're consuming. It's eroding a lot of the fabric of what I think make people fulfilled and happy and healthy. And then we look around and say, gosh, why do we have shootings in public places? Why are there so many people on opioids? Why is there like depression and suicide and all these things?
Yeah.
And it's like that is a byproduct of the off-gassing of all this junk that we've generated to sell each other.
Of course.
And I mean, maybe it just takes one conscious act of consuming less, or turning off YouTube.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, we all know that Instagram causes like FOMO, right? Like, why do we get into debt? Because everyone I see is eating out all the time, right? They're always eating out. They're always taking pictures of these great foods. So I need to go and do that too. Like, how come I'm not? Like, why am I less worthy of that experience as well, right? So then I get into debt. Then we're all in debt. Now we're working for the man because we are so in debt, right? And, I'm not against plastics, right? But I definitely am against like lead paint on children's toys coming from overseas. And that actually is a thing. Like, we know that there's certain toys that come with lead paint, right? But there's also this idea that like plastics are throwaway, right? And it's how we perceive objects of like, oh, the microwave's broken, I'll throw it away. It's easier to get a new microwave, right? It's easier, but in the long run, like, we're all going to suffer from that. Yeah, out of sight, out of mind. I don't see these giant piles of electronics in India because that's not my daily experience, right? I think that, oh, there's nothing wrong with getting a new iPhone every 2 years, right? And I'm not trying to like spew hate on that either. But there's this idea of like, we don't even value things to try to make them last. We no longer, and that's like something that is embodied in Wookins, is like this idea of like, why don't we make them last? Why don't we hang on to things? Why do we have this throwaway mentality? Why do we have, it all comes back. And it's like, if I get addicted to a phone, how would I ever expect that a child wouldn't? Like you said, they don't even know what water is to like know that, oh, I'm in water. And I see so many parents yelling at their kids about their screen time. And it's like, and I do it too. Like, I'm guilty of that. And it's like, well, then why did I provide them the screen to get addicted to, right? Or
and why am I sitting on the couch using my screen and then getting
at
really
the
mad
same
when
time?
they're trying,
Exactly. Yeah. Like, it's a hard world. And this gets back to like, we're all weak and we all need a little help, right? And if the system around us is set up to just like feed and prey on this weakness of us, like, man, that sucks, right? But there is a way out, or there is like an alternative, and we just have to like be honest with ourselves that we've got it good. I am the luckiest man on earth, and I want to embrace.
Here it is.
Yeah, and I want to embrace that. Like, what is great? Because you can view life. This is my opinion here, but like, you can view life only two ways. Maybe there's a third, and you probably have a totally different way, right? The first one is life is a struggle, right? And you can latch on to that and say that life is a struggle, right? Like, yeah, life is hard. Like baboons, if you live out in the wild, a baboon will crush your skull in, right? There's no morality or ethics involved in life. Life is hard, right? Like if you have to grow your own food or you have to find your own food, life is hard, right? But you can also view life the other way, which is creation. You have this opportunity every single day that you wake up to create, to build whatever opportunity you want. And creating to me is also like going and surfing. Right? Like you have the opportunity to go and surf if you want to go and surf. Like if that's your thing. And I love surfing and I'm totally for surfing. So I want to like tell people go out and surf. Right? But like you have that opportunity. That is creation to me, is taking advantage of like your opportunity of life. You wake up and you have this ability. And there's definitely people that don't. We should like empathize with that. Right? And that's what, like vulnerable people and COVID kind of it's upsetting, right? But if you're able-bodied, I'm like the most able-bodied human I know. One of the reasons why I'm the luckiest man alive. I can do anything I want. Like literally my body carries me and allows me to do anything. I can rock climb, I can paraglide, I can surf. And that's how I want to view life. And I am very privileged and I'm the luckiest man alive. Like I acknowledge that. But should I like drown in that, or should I embrace it and like try to pass it on and try to incorporate others into that cycle of creation and that cycle of goodness? Like I want to invite my friends climbing, because I get enjoyment out of climbing, right? Like huffing and puffing and trying like an athletic move and being wild, exposed, and like feeling the rush of like being up on the rock. But I also really enjoy being with a partner, right? I enjoy that community of like, how did you do that move? Oh, you got to move your left foot like this. Like to me, yeah, like we want to bring people. It's all about people. Like the group dynamics is hard, but it's the most fulfilling. That people interaction, that community. And Wookins has showed me that, like, it's been so great to like have people reach out to me and they're like, oh, I have this person, you really want to get into contact with that person, and then they put me in contact and they're like a wonderful person doing this awesome amazing thing on the like tangentially, and I didn't know about it, but we totally jive and blah 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 blah. These kinds of things is like hooking into your network. It's removing yourself from the screen, which is just feeding you these things that aren't really like your voice or the voice that is like serving you, right? Unhooking from that and going into your network, which actually serves you, right? And that's what the essence of Facebook used to be, right? Like when they first started was your network, and what about your network serves you, right? Like my wife is from South America, like sharing photos with her friends and family, 3,000 miles away. That is so powerful. Like I'm not going to deny that is amazing and helps us. Being able to FaceTime grandma with my kids, like that is amazing and is something that I would never want to like give away, right? And even Elon Musk says it, like if I could snap my fingers, I wouldn't stop petroleum, right? Because that would be terrible. So there's like these great benefits of burning petroleum, right? But we also have to ask, like, is there any negatives? And like, can we do better? Like, and that's an opportunity to do better, right? Like we can make bullet trains, like talk about awesome jobs and like clean, transportation. Like, why don't we have any magnet trains? Magnets are amazing. So hopefully like Wookins inspire people to like learn about magnet technology, and we get a magnet train from Denver to Minneapolis, 400 miles an hour. Awesome. I wish, I hope,
Hyperloop.
like, yes, not Hyperloop. I mean, anything, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because in the beginning of your soapboxing there, I'm on the same page.
Sure.
And like I feel like I've taken on this negativity from the frustration of wanting to share that message that every moment of your life is an opportunity to create. It's a gift. And it's not to be taken for granted, because I just read this book. I just interviewed the author yesterday, this book about dying, and like the whole stress of this book is like we don't realize enough that like we are going to die. Like this moment right now, your able body, like all of these things that you're taking for granted in this moment, like that is a little magical window.
Yeah.
And if we're not like realizing that and stepping away from these things that are stealing our time and attention, that knowledge of our own creative power, then that's the part that is heartbreaking in a way. And not that it could be any other way than it is right now. Like this is the way that the world is. Like there was no other way that it could have been.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's what I'm saying. It's all luck to me. Like, there's no other way. So there's no other way. So how can you say I was in control of that, right?
Yeah, so I mean, like, the frustration that I feel like I'm just emoting, and not intentionally, it's just like, you're bringing in this, like, beautiful startup creation that's, like, in this, seed flowering stage, and I'm at a place where I'm just really reluctant to plant the next seed, because I've, I don't know, like I want to bring this realization that you describe so well to the world in mass, and then I have to fight the world.
If you're not feeling good, travel wide. You've got to travel wide.
Yeah.
It's simple, man. It's simple. Yeah, I feel you, dude. It's tough, and I totally, that resonates with me. I totally understand it, and that's why you got to reach out to those. That's what the community is for, is like when you're on the ground, like hopefully someone in your network comes and picks you up, invites you to go rock climbing, and like that dopamine hit of exercise helps you out a little bit.
And I'm leaning into doing things wrong, and there's consequences with that. Like, I mean, even with my my partner last night, like we're having these very deep, challenging conversations about like I should just go back and make money the easy way. I should just get fed by the algorithm. Not that that's what she's saying necessarily, but like you can fight the hard battle only for so long before those needs kind of push you back into the mainstream.
Yeah, totally.
And so, you're right. Like, travel wide, talk to the community. I feel like with you as well, like the best advice that I can give is, there is in you some center that little robot came from, and there will be moments when someone comes and says, you know what, we're going to clear all these obstacles for you. It's going to be great. Like this is just like your dream realized quicker, faster, but there might be some part of you that knows like this is not the way that is right for that little robot.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to say no to those things.
I'm sure.
But I think when and if we do, it's even harder. But there's some like deeper satisfaction that comes from the spirit with which you created that little wooden robot. That's the special thing about it. It's not just the wood toy. There's something uniquely you about that. And if that goes out into the world and it's not carrying that spirit, then it's just another piece of wood.
Totally. And that totally resonates with me, and I appreciate that. Like honestly, hopefully my mother and father like instilled in me those values, before 7 years old, and it's deep within me, so I have like the courage to make those decisions when they do arise, right? Instead of going down the dark side of of scalability and easy money, if you will.
Well, but that's beautiful too. Like that's the hard part, is like with the easy money, you can go sit on a beach and now like you're fulfilled, but like something was lost. And I feel, and maybe I'm totally wrong. This is my own, like, this is my biggest challenge. Like I'm fighting this feeling that the things we do matter, and that they are, the seeds we plant today is the food that we eat tomorrow. And if we keep planting these toxic seeds because they grow faster, well, yeah, we've got to enjoy that little spurt of growth, but in the future, we're all eating shit because that's what we planted.
For sure. And I feel we're at a crossroads. We're at an awakening. I really do feel it. I can feel it vibrating through the universe. Like, people are awakening, people are valuing, trying to get back to, sustainable, renewable materials. They're trying to tap into that fundamental nature of humans and interaction. I think we are trying to like embrace community, live our own story, tell our own stories, share our stories, be a part of other people's stories. I think we're at that moment, and like I'm excited. I'm really hopeful for it. Like I feel like we are, getting better. Like I really do. Yeah. So I'm really happy to like bring kids into this world and have them experience this beautiful world too, which is awesome. And I want to take care of it while I'm here for them and for us and for, even for the elderly people. Like I want to take care of their world as well. Like there's value for everyone, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's when you have that realization that we're not as individual as we think. And even the billionaires that think that they're like on top of the world and they're doing everything right and it's just a gravy train, like we all breathe the same air, we all drink the same water, we're all tied to the same human story happening, and so it's in everyone's best interest long term to take care of your neighbor, whether they're rich, poor, look like you don't, cowboy or liberal or whatever, you know, like that's the part I think that has been lost a little bit with this kind of hyper fracturing in the digital space, where you can have all of these little identities and they don't line up with the people that you're actually walking around with on the street. But when you step back from that and realize how connected we are, it becomes everybody's opportunity to create something that makes other people well and happy. And I love that, seeing the excitement and enthusiasm and the creative motivation that you have and a lot of other people do right now. It is a wild time to be a small creator, because you do have access to these huge, audiences and tools. Like there's never been a better time to create, but it's also laced with this very tricky path where it's easy, so easy to take that bait and fall into a trap, and now that motivation is gone.
Right? That reminds me of like the Chappelle show when he's like the internet in reality, and he's walking through like this white space and like all these nefarious figures are popping out of the internet and like contacting him. It's kind of like that, right? Like you're in this nice white world, everything is like bright and cozy, but then you have all these like things coming at you and they're all negative, right? Like that it reminded me of that. I would love to like end this on like, if it makes people feel better, like, we should actually feel kind of bad for billionaires, right? Like look at Prince and Michael Jackson and how they ended up in like their last days. Like they get addicted to, opioids, and they get depressed and they kill themselves, right? On top of like having like crazy, like crazy behaviors, right? Like you think you're a god when you get to that level, and what does that do to your psychology? Look at Kanye West. I'm not hating on him. I actually love his work, and I hope he's a good person in person. But like there's reasons, like who wants to be Elon Musk? Like he has notoriety, but like he works 19 hours a day. Like do you really want that? Like just like you were saying, like that's not there's not balance there, and that's okay for some people, right? And I hope he does well. He's doing cool stuff too, so but like just because they're billionaires, like I wouldn't
totally be careful what you wish for, and realize that even the elite or whatever, like it's easy to point fingers and sling stones, but they're just humans. They were born in a certain place and time. They had their own pressures and family and everything else, and it's my belief that any one of us could have inhabited that body and we would have done the exact same thing,
right? Like we have it in us to murder, like we have it in us to do terrible things. That's humans have done terrible things, but like you can either embrace that or that other great side, right? Like you don't have to believe in Jesus to be Christ-like. You don't have to believe in Jesus to be Christ-like. Who doesn't want to be Christ-like? I'm just saying. So Thank you very much for having me. Like, honestly.
Yeah,
like,
this
I'm
felt
glad
like
to
a great
talk about it.
conversation. I'm glad we put the LSD in the coffee.
Could I give you
And-
an ask? Could you put the Kickstarter link or like link to us?
Yeah,
in, like,
why don't you plug it?
in the
Do,
text?
do a solid plug, and we'll.
So
plug it.
we're doing a Kickstarter campaign. It's like literally probably for like the next 3 hours when this goes live. But you know, in the future, like these are the Wookins and these are the characters. You know, they're amazing. They're put them into, you know, people's hands and they get it. They sell themselves. But yes, if you click on the link and support us to get your first off the first production line, that'd be great. Just check us out. I'm sure you'll hear about us in the future.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cheers, man.
Thank you, Ryan.
That was cool. Oh shit! I didn't record it.
All good.
The number of times that's actually happened is.
How do you know whether it's recording or not?